Hey, welcome back to NBC LX. I'm Tabitha Lipkin. President Biden inherited tricky tech questions and problems he's going to have to try and solve in the next 4 years. Here are just a couple of them. We've got questions over how much power Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and other tech companies have, Section 230 and the ongoing debate of online expression, international tech things like TikTok and China, and a concern that's really being brought to our attention is should our government do when it comes to tech from other countries that don't share our values? Finally, the digital divide. The pandemic highlighted a gap between Americans who actually can access and afford internet services with the millions who can't. President Biden's priorities mention universal broadband, but he hasn't been specific on how to get there. Here to share short and long-term solutions to the digital divide is former AT&T attorney and founder of Vertical Consultants, Hugh Odom. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, Hugh. Let's go ahead and start with that. What are the short-term solutions and what are the long-term solutions to solving the digital divide?
Well, the short-term solutions is, I think what we're trying to do with the wireless carriers is bring out temporary solutions in the way of usage of thousands, if not tens of thousands of existing cell towers are out there that could be available for more equipment to be placed upon them to use for short-term Wi-Fi spots and other internet access points. The other short-term solution we're seeing out there is temporary pop-up cell sites as well. These are being brought in. Just think of it much like a situation where you have a tornado or hurricane or natural disaster and you have an area of the country that's impacted. Well, this is a national situation. So we can have the same sort of emphasis on bringing out temporary facilities until we get long-term solutions. In long-term solutions, the big thing is a bigger build out of the infrastructure. We have great technology available, but if you don't have the infrastructure to put it on, it's nothing you can do. So build out of infrastructure in areas, cooperation with local, state, and even federal government entities to open up the access to bring these infrastructure developers into those areas, the wireless carriers into those areas, and provide services for all types of people across the country.
Well, that's a good point you bring up. Has the pandemic actually changed the outlook of wireless services from kind of a luxury to more of a utility like water or electric?
Yeah, a recent survey said since COVID hit, about 90% of people out there say wireless service is either important or essential, with the majority, about 60%, saying essential. And then what you have between that is you have some areas of the country that are impacted differently. You have about 60% of people living outside of urban or suburban areas saying that they have either no access or very much substandard access to wireless or internet service, while the difference is in urban areas about 10%.
It's pretty incredible. And speaking of which, let's talk about the importance of wireless access in these rural areas, especially as more and more students are having to essentially do school from home, or information about the pandemic, how that spreads if they can't get access to a TV. Maybe they're looking it up online as well.
Well, right. I mean, you have areas that we're just seeing the divide grow farther and farther, and I call it a digital divide. I call it a wireless wall. You drive out you're in an urban area, drive out to certain portions of the outside of that, and this wall hits, and you can't get access. If you're a student, you can't get access to do your work online. You can't get access to certain information in comparison to others. If you're a telehealth services, same thing there. You're having a divide there in the ability to have access to certain services, and even if those services are available, it's a slow process. And same thing with economic situations with regards to businesses and how they are impacted, being able to operate if they're on one side of that wall or the other side of that wall.
If we really take a look at this, and you talk about infrastructure, how long would it take to ensure that the entirety of the United States had access to the internet, so wireless internet specifically?
Well, that's a great question. You know, the build out is going to take several years, if decades, to do. But the big thing is allowing access to these areas. What I mean by that is you have to, just like back in the 1940s when you had electricity that wasn't available in certain parts of the country, you had a bill that was passed by the United States government saying, hey, let's cooperate with local and state governments to get local and regional carriers or providers out there. And that's the same thing that needs to happen with this, is you have an infrastructure, like you said, it's what's looked as a luxury. A phone was looked at as a luxury years ago. Now it is a necessity. Getting access is a necessity. We need to get that out there. So the hope is more and more money gets pumped into this project. But the bigger hope is there's more access available to smaller carriers and smaller infrastructure developers to be able to serve those communities as well.
I was reading about some of your work, and in it you said that cell tower industry is a lot like the oil industry was 100 years ago. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. Well, there was a misconception. Years ago, people would go out and they would ask to drill on somebody's land. They would say, hey, I'm going to drill on your land. I'll pay you a certain amount of money, and I get access to all the oil. Mm-hmm. And the government stepped in and said, hey, hold on. We got to make sure this is a fair deal for both the property owner and the oil company. The same thing is going on in the telecom industry. We work with property owners around the country to make sure they get a fair deal with regards to the use of their land, because that utility is the same. It's being pulled from that property. All the technology on your phone, your ability to communicate, is all based upon that cell tower being out there. And the problem is, just like the oil and gas industry of about 100 years ago, the telecom industry isn't, what we like to say, probably paying fair prices for the use of those properties.
Fascinating. And real quick, before I let you go, we've got about 30 seconds left here. What is 5G? And let's compare 5G to what we're dealing with, where some places don't even have access to wireless internet.
Well, 5G does two basic things better than 4G. It provides you speed, incredible speed, up to 100 times faster than what we have now. It's second, it provides a lower latency. And that means, if you think of it, you push a button, it takes a second for that action to happen. You push a button, it takes a millisecond for that action to happen. That's latency. The big thing with 5G is it basically is how they do that is a densification. They have to build more and more cell sites to make the network denser, and that gives everybody the ability to do that.
Fascinating. Hugh, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on NBC LX. We appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you.